Hey everyone, Ethan here from WordTech, back with another episode of Blips for you guys. This episode is on planar magnetic drivers. More specifically, planar magnetic drivers found in headphones. That's the most common place that you generally see them. So to start off, I'll explain a little bit about how a standard, or standard as in dynamic driver, functions, which is what you're used to seeing when it comes to speakers. Driver being what actually makes the noise in the speaker. That is the technical term for them. Rather than speaker. Speaker generally is configured of one or more drivers in a box and whatnot for acoustic performance and whatnot, whereas the driver is the thing that actually vibrates to make the noise. So a standard speaker, you'll see a cone-shaped thing, right? Like this is the most common thing that you end up seeing in a speaker is a cone, or sometimes it's a very subtle cone, but there's a curve to it. It's called a cone. And basically around the edge of that you have what's called the surround, which is a piece of rubber that allows that cone to vibrate. And then behind the cone you have magnets attached to basically a stick that comes out of the back of the cone that allows the cone to move, and this vibration is what creates sound. Sound is vibration through the air, right? These are really common because they're cheap, they're easy to build, and they do have certain characteristics that make them good, especially for like subwoofers and the like, is something that's larger, and you can make them extremely large without very high cost is another benefit to them. But some of their downfalls are sound quality. When it comes to the way that they're shaped, the vibration of the sound is actually kind of going out of the cone, but they can collide with each other, causing things to be less precise, as well as they are not as quick to respond, or as fast is the proper term in drivers. They're not as fast of a driver, and also the glues and other things like that can wear out on them, causing the sound to actually change over time, which is something you definitely don't want. Is you don't want a pair of headphones, like we're talking about headphones specifically here, but even speakers that sound different 10 years from now than they do currently, right? Or at least drastically different, which sometimes dynamic drivers can do. So planar magnetic driver is, the idea is to solve that. And again, it's most commonly used in headphones. It's pretty rare that you see it in like speakers and stuff like that. It is somewhat similar to an electrostatic driver, which is much more expensive than the way a planar magnetic driver functions, and I'll do that for another video. Now, basically, the diaphragm, which is the thing that actually vibrates to make the noise, the whole device is called a driver, but the diaphragm is the actual bit that vibrates. The driver in this is actually a very thin film, about 1/10 the thickness of a human hair. So as you can imagine, they're very fragile, meaning they have to be, closed up and not touched, because anything can break them. Now, in between this film, there are actual electrical conductors, also known as wires, that basically run a kind of serpentine pattern, or an S pattern, back and forth through the actual film. And that is actually encased with magnets. More on that in just a moment. Now, the big advantage to it being a flat surface, though, that is so thin, is that it vibrates evenly and is able to more accurately reproduce sound, as well as have a much more flat sound curve. So you don't have like your bass being way louder than your treble or something like that. It is a flat surface, and that helps drastically with reducing that, as well as reducing interference. Now, planar magnetic drivers are also a super fast driver, meaning they can respond extremely quickly, which gives them a more accurate sound reproduction of what the original sound was supposed to be. There is no kind of distortion and stuff like that inherently tends to happen with dynamic drivers, especially when pushed to louder volumes. Now, planar magnetic drivers are becoming more common because we've recently been able to develop the technology to be more sensitive, meaning it takes less power to make them as loud, so you don't have to have necessarily really high-end audio gear to benefit from them. So therefore, cheaper planar magnetic driver headphones are starting to come out. It used to be that you commonly have to have something like I have, which is you can just barely see over here, which is my shit Audio Valhalla 2. I'll be doing a review of that in the future. That is capable of driving 600 plus ohm headphones. It's a monster, but that's also an expensive unit. You don't want to have to pay for that oftentimes just to get good audio, and so they weren't mainstream by any means. They were only known by really high-end audiophiles, but they're becoming more mainstream. Basically, the way that these function, like I said, there's a very, very thin diaphragm with a metal coil, wire, whatever you want to call it, inside it that is electrically conductive, and that is connected to a power source, positive, negative, right? And then sandwiched on top of that diaphragm is magnets, really powerful magnets, and generally neodymium magnets. And they're attached in a pattern of lines, vertical lines with alternating polarities, which gives them more control. And so that way the sound also obviously can escape the driver when it's actually vibrating. And what these two magnets do is they sandwich together. Imagine like these are the magnets here, right? You've got north south. That's how their polarity is laid out, and you have them sandwiched together on top of the diaphragm like that. And when you apply an electrical current to the wire running through the diaphragm, it causes those magnets to push and pull back and forth, therefore vibrating the diaphragm, which is what allows it to make sound, vibration. And like I said before, it took a lot of power to get that to function, but not so much anymore. In fact, you can get planar magnetic headphones that are, down in like almost like the 50-40 ohm range, which is pretty impressive, with pretty high sensitivity, over 100 decibel sensitivity, which is also impressive. Now, this also has the advantage that they don't wear out very quickly, since it's just a film being vibrated a fairly small amount. As long as the film itself doesn't break and the wires don't break, etc., etc. Obviously there's other factors that play into it, but it tends to be a pretty reliable, durable driver, other than if you take it apart and you puncture the film, then it's ruined, of course. But the other thing is that it tends to not have any sound shift over time, so there's no actual, change when it comes to the quality of how they sound. From day one, when you get them, to 10 years in the future, they should sound nearly identical, probably impossible for a human ear to even tell the difference, which is an impressive thing. A lot of times dynamic drivers, people even put them through like stress tests or breaking in when they first get them, which is basically they turn up the volume really loud, almost to the point of distortion, and let them run for like a day or two, which in theory is supposed to kind of loosen up the surround and whatnot, and maybe loosen up the glue a little bit, so that the significant sound shift that can sometimes come, generally on lower quality headphones, but can come in all kinds of different dynamic drivers, that sound shift there actually is basically gone through, what might be a month or two of use, of standard use, in a day or two, so that way you can just leave it there and you're good to go when it comes to the sound. It shouldn't shift drastically very quickly like they can sometimes at the beginning, but there's still going to be a sound shift over time, and planar magnetic drivers don't tend to do that anywhere near as much, if at all. Now, one big factor when it comes to planar magnetic drivers, which by the way are also commonly known as orthodynamic drivers, that is not a proper term though technically, so planar magnetic is the proper terminology to use for that. But another common thing is actually the higher quality that magnetic field that's created due to the magnets being in position, the higher quality, which is not going to get into details of exactly what that means, but the stronger, so to speak, actually allows for more precise movement and less distortion and whatnot. So it's important to have, when you're paying for higher quality ones, because they do sound like an almost simple technology, you're paying for a higher quality magnetic field and whatnot. Now, one cool fact about planar magnetic drivers is they're not only available in speakers and headphones now, they're actually not commonly, but they are available in in-ear headphones. Now, I say headphones rather than in-ear phones or something like that, or IEMs, in-ear monitors. The reason that I actually say headphones is because they're quite large, but they're available from a company called Odyssey, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, I believe it's Odyssey, but the Sign 20 headphones, or in-ear headphones, as I said, basically you have a little in-ear piece that goes in your ear as you would expect, but then the actual outer cavity of your ear is covered by this piece that has a planar magnetic driver in it. So, I mean, they're like yay big. I mean, they're probably about an inch in diameter, although they're not a perfect circle. And then the sound is funneled back down towards your ear, right? So they probably do have some noise leakage and stuff. I haven't tested them myself. I plan to get them in the future, but they are quite expensive. But the point is, the technology has developed to the point that a company has actually put the effort into designing them in in-ear headphones rather than just headphones and speakers, meaning that they're becoming more widely available. And I don't think they'll ever replace dynamic drivers, because dynamic drivers have been around so long, they're just so incredibly cheap at this point. But it is cool to be able to see headphones for like even as low as like $200, although I haven't seen them much lower, if at all lower than that. But you do see planar magnetic drivers in headphones around $200. The good ones, in my opinion, tend to start at like the $250, maybe $300 ranges, where you start to get in the decent ones, but they can also go up to, $1,000, $2,000 or more, depending on what you're doing. Although at that point, if you're going to start spending ridiculous amounts of money, you may want to go with an electrostatic driver instead. Now, thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the series so far. I'll be doing more videos or more episodes of Blips on drivers specifically for both speakers and headphones, more focusing on headphones, but a general overview of them for both, which don't usually differ too drastically other than size. Thank you everybody for watching, and don't forget to be ready for the episode next week.